I have brought peace, justice, and prosperity to my new empire.
Hey everyone, welcome to Vassals of Kingsgrave's 800th episode, which is kind of amazing to contemplate. My name is Bina007. I'm one of the curators at VOK, so one of the people who helps make sure that we keep the show on the road. And we are going back to our roots for our 800th episode, which will be a little bit of a compilation of clips. As some of you may or may not know, we started off as a fan group of the longest running podcast dedicated to George R. R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire, a podcast of Ice and Fire. And through being fans of that podcast, we came together and did our own podcast called Vassals of Kingsgrave. So we're very rooted in Song of Ice and Fire and then Game of Thrones. So we thought that we'd get together and have people send in clips of the wackiest, craziest, tinfoiliest theories of how a particular character or a particular story arc, or indeed the whole set of books, will finish in the low probability event that George actually finishes them. In this first batch of theorizing, I'm joined by my fellow curator, Adam.
Hey, this is Adam, also known as DrownedSnow.
And also by KingJucio.
Hey, it's Ben, KingJucio.
Trivia King.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Maybe soon.
Okay, well, Ben, why don't you kick us off with, are you doing a character, story arc, or the whole shebang? What's your tinfoil theory?
It's one character, and it's the most minor of character. Big Walder Frey, the little one.
Oh my god, I love how niche. This is just so on brand for VOK. Like, rather than doing what's going to happen to Sansa, it's like, let me take a sub-character of a sub-family, and then why don't you give us a bit of a run-in? Tell us where Walder is, or Big Walder Frey is, when we last have seen him in the books.
Well, he's currently with the Freys that are heading towards the Crofters Village and Stannis. So, from what we know of what's going to happen, it's almost certain that the battle will be had, and I'm a proponent of the idea that, of course, the Night Lamp idea that Stannis will end up winning through trickery. For Big Walder, because he's, I think, 11 years old at this time in the story, I don't think he's going to be in that main force to die quickly, because he's a kid. And what does Stannis do with people that he ends up capturing, if not use them? Theon, Asha, and the, various other Reacher Lords, Storm Lords, post Renly's death. He'll use people as long as they can, bend the knee and we can move forward. The Wildlings, another example of that. So for Big Walder, I think he's going to use him as his squire, which, funny enough, he doesn't have one right now. He's Davos' son, got sent back to the Wall, and his other squire died on the, on the march to the Crofters Village. So Stannis is left without a squire, and Big Walder presents an opportunity later on. If you know your Frey genealogy and the absurd massive family tree that is, his uncle is the current steward of the twins, Lame Lothar, the one who planned the Red Wedding. And if there's someone that could get into the twins, it's probably, Big Walder Frey, considering when old Papa Frey dies, who's going to take over the twins is kind of going to be thrown into question. And I think it very funny and in the George headspace that if the Freys go into a big kerfuffle with each other over succession, that Big Walder Frey does end up winning out, at least for a little bit.
Do you think he'll be Lord of the Twins when the book series ends? Like, will this be I
don't know if I would.
Or is it just king for a day, kind of like Rob style?
I could see either way. I'm very much of the opinion that it probably won't last, though. Rising like he will through a lot of murder is bound to earn you scorn and enemies. And I know that the Freys aren't against kinslaying at this point. So
the problem is that they're not against slaying anyone, even people that they've been allied with. And I would have thought whoever ends up on whatever is left of whatever throne that's ruling whatever kingdoms, you would not want a strategically important place like the twins in a family that you cannot trust like the Freys. I mean, I don't understand how anyone of any power leaves the twins in the Freys' hands. To me, they have proven themselves so untrustworthy. So I totally buy into your theory. I think, yeah, absolutely. Squire, 100%, Lord of the Twins for a while, maybe, but I just don't see how the Freys are left in charge. But so in your conception, who do you think ends up as the ruling family of Rump Westeros?
Oh, that I think we get an Age of Heroes return, essentially, where Westeros returns to kingdoms separate and no longer binded together. I mean, I could see Rump existences, like I guess like some sort of Riverlands, Stormlands, maybe the West, maybe. But honestly, I don't see it. I think we're returning to like a pre-Aegon existence in Westeros, where kingdoms war with each other again, and
Yeah.
there's
Like the barons in British or English medieval history. Adam, thoughts
Yeah.
on this theory? I think it's a good theory, actually. I like it.
Democracy. No, I think no, I do like your theory, and I think you are right though that anyone of any intelligence that if they sit the Iron Throne is not really going to trust the Freys, but that also doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have to move against them. I mean, like imagine a scenario where Tywin's still alive, everything's settled, and the Lannisters are ruling. Like, how hard would it be to be like, oh yeah, we're just going to build another bridge castle further south, and just over a couple of years, like just be like, oh, we have the money to like basically make them pointless.
I don't know how much money will be thrown around post Westeros surviving whatever it survives. That's the thing. The Freys
It's all made up money anyway, right? Like,
so true. Yeah.
none of it's real. Except for the Iron Bank's money.
Yeah, the only people with money at the end of all of this are the Iron Bank of Bravos, right? So maybe they'll be installing some people a bit how the IMF go around installing, people in charge of dodgy governments that are indebted. Adam, what's your crackpot theory?
I have several, but the probably I'll just go with the one about the character that is the closest to my heart, and that is Rickon Stark, the feral one, and his good boy Shaggy Dog. I fully believe. I don't believe that they're going to come back, and I don't think he's going to come back as like Lord Stark or anything like that. But I fully believe that they survive and are no longer in Westeros at the end. I would like to see either a feral Rickon north of the Wall, or perhaps somewhere in Essos, like making a living as a sellsword. Years later.
I think my issue is that I don't even get how he becomes socialized enough to be a sellsword in Essos. To me, he is genuinely kind of man-wolf north of the Wall, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, he's also like 5 years old, so I mean, time would definitely have to level out some of that. I mean, by the time he's 10 or 11, like he's not going to still be that way. But I don't imagine him ever being like kind of like a tame character, because I feel like Shaggy Dog is, the wolves embody the children. So I feel like he's not really good to be Lord of Winterfell, or even like necessarily like a second son, kind of like involved in intrigue and all that, or like beholden to the Night's Watch or anything. Like he's someone who should be ideally should be like a rogue agent.
For me, he would end up just basically walking into Shaggy Dog and just never getting out again, and just ending up.
And then you just have a feral 5-year-old that just never leaves.
Bina,
he's going to die in the north of the Wall.
I can see that.
Just wait, Bina, because I'm coming around for seconds in a second.
Okay. So what's
there
your
are so many good
reaction to this theory then, Ben?
I think Rickon as a second like wandering wolf is actually not a horrible idea for, I guess, a sweeter end to his story than I conceptualize, because I think poor Rickon is not gonna have a good time. I have a very dark end in mind.
Those are most of the theories, and I hate them all. So, and I feel like George wouldn't do that. George would never do that to poor Rickon.
But he will do so much stuff to so many other people, so why not? I mean, I don't know, Ben, do you want to go with your go-round theory on Rickon?
I'm so sorry. My thought is he's gonna end up worked into, Shaggy Dog as his brother takes his place in his body as a king abomination, essentially. That Bran will end up king in the north, at least, or whatever's left of that, as Rickon.
Oh, like body snatched by Bran.
Yeah, literally body snatched completely.
I guess so far the Bran we've met, I don't think would do that, but he's just kind of, gotten up there with Bloodraven, and we don't know what that's going to do to him mentally.
I don't
He
have
might have
high
already
hopes.
eaten Jojen. So
I thought the point was that he was meant to become the new three-eyed raven, right? That he was going to become the new blood raven, and he would be of influence, but he would never come back down below the wall.
yeah, I think that's what we're supposed to think. I mean, that's the obvious theory that I think most people see happening.
See, I see him connecting himself to the werewood net, and then the part of his conscious that is his after you touch like a collective conscious like that. But yeah, like the part of him that's him is gonna leave and leave his body there. But that's also because I have a low opinion of what Bran the person will end up as.
You think he's sort of just kind of a side quest?
Not a side quest. I think it's his part of the story is very important. It's just that I think that his end is going to be one of the darker ones in like its conclusion for the
But if
character
he
itself.
ends up on the throne of the North and he's inhabiting Rickon and he's entered a very dark place, whatever's left of his consciousness, that's not a good end for the North. I mean, that's kind of what kind of rule would he make?
Because no one would know it's him, right?
No,
And then
no
he
one
has
would.
to hide. He has to hide that forever.
Yeah. I think something we'll learn is the whole that he won't be the first. This is another idea that I have where he's not the first King Abomination Stark. That the original Brandon the Builder was also an abomination. Hence, he was able to live for so long and build so many things.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So his own namesake is also this abomination who existed for so long for the betterment of humanity in part.
So contrary to the Bran the Builder theory that he just sort of like werewood hopped through people throughout the years, influencing them, like you think
I think he
like
subsumed
took over
his son.
people?
Yeah.
So whose body did he inhabit, or what was the body swap?
Oh, I think it was his son that he inhabited next. And thus there was like multiple Brandon the Builders that did these projects. He probably started with the wall. I'll probably say that like he was the wall guy. The original Brandon the Builder was probably the guy that, built the wall. But also that type of project would take forever. Even in George's world, even if with giants and help from the children of the forest, that would take forever, from what we're told about how it's built at least.
Okay, I am intrigued. Initially, I was dismissive, but now I'm intrigued. Kind of makes sense. There's precedence, right, with the name. Okay.
Yeah.
there's a lot
Hence,
there.
also the going into the werewood net being a thing that like influences him so much. I mean, if he's living those past lives, or at least seeing parts of those past lives, I wonder, if Brandon's life especially is really influential to him. That is original Brandon.
Maybe he has some sort of magic around the name, and any Bran or Brandon Stark just kind of gets pulled in. I don't know.
That could be something.
I mean, I don't know if this is the sort of thing George would ever, actually show us.
Yeah.
I like the fact that these are open questions that we can always kind of be like, oh, this might happen, and I think it'll probably end in the same way for a lot of these stories where, hey, there's still options, which is one thing I really like about George's world. If he were to ever finish the books, I don't think he would close off as many things as often happens at the end of the story.
I agree completely on that part.
Which I like. I like these. I like that stories can live on, especially when you have a rich fandom community that can discuss things like this, and it makes for good conversation. Whereas some people they don't like anyone to play in their sandbox, and they're like, all right, I'm gonna put a period on everything.
Yeah, no, there will definitely be ambiguity in my opinion.
Or maybe part of the reason I'm willing to believe this Bran theory is seeing the choice they made to have Bran rule at the end of it.
Right.
Admittedly in his own body, which I think struck a lot of people as kind of so out of left field that it probably could only have come from them seeing some kind of treatment from George. And that even though a lot of how we kind of get to some of these final decisions we didn't all agree with in the show, or they felt rushed or not amply seeded, like it kind of felt like, oh, okay, well, either D&D have come up with something completely gonzo, or actually this came from George and they just haven't put any of the work in to make it make sense. But this idea that Bran does accumulate so much wisdom and sort of trans time wisdom to become actually a very good but kind of slightly unreal, surreal ruler, I guess does that influence your view on this theory, Ben, or does that Was that
it definitely was the basis for it, because I always thought, I don't think it makes sense for Bran to come back down south. I think
Yeah,
his
I
body
agree.
for sure stays in the north. That part like totally took me out of it, because that journey, I don't know, something about that journey when you're reading it, it feels very final. Every
Hmm.
threshold they cross feels final. You know, when they go under the wall, that feels like we're not
Never
leaving.
coming back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Especially for the side characters, but especially for Bran as well. You know, like I think, you know, they're all doomed to die basically. But for Bran, I don't think his body is ever coming back down south.
And
And
then
I
they
think,
talk about how his destiny lies elsewhere, and that's
mhm,
why like what happens at the end of the show, I think, influences certainly the way I think about this. It's like, well, if they got there through something or something similar to what George told them, which I, have a hard time, decoding what is and isn't from George. I mean, because they've explicitly stated some things, and other things they've we were very careful not to. But if that's the case, then yeah, how does that look? He was basically, I would think he would have to spend a lot more time where he was before. It seems like he was rushed south in the show, right?
yeah, I
And
mean, the
then boom, he's
pacing
back
on
at
that
Winterfell. And
was,
yeah,
yeah,
I mean,
not the
as good as that
greatest.
episode was, it was like he just got there, So I don't think that makes sense for him to show up as like, I have knowledge and I'm the wise king you're going to want eventually. It's like, well, he had like a weekend course,
Yeah.
didn't he? He didn't get the degree.
He
So
really didn't.
yeah.
Part of this even goes to the whole like Hodor idea, that I think Hodor's like holding the door so that he can leave basically body wise and get into Rickon.
Yeah, if there's
And
it's one way in, one way out. There's no exit. You're
yeah,
thinking, and then
yeah,
he gets out, but his body doesn't.
yeah,
Yeah, I could
basically.
see that. I could see that. And in some ways, that would make a lot more sense than what we got.
Yeah, absolutely. This is really giving me food for thought. I
Well,
like the idea. Yeah,
here's
go
some
for
more
it.
food for thought. So I like had Chat GPT come up with some Mad Libs, and then I filled some in, and I had them fill some in. But several of them, just along Bran's. This is just totally random because it's AI, but a lot of them seem to think Bran is now leading the Night's Watch, and a couple of them like very clearly he can walk again. So I don't know how that happens. But my favorite one has Brienne on the Iron Throne with Sam as her hand.
Brienne on the Iron Throne and Sam is her hand.
Sam is her hand. Yes,
That does
they are.
sound like probably the best end to Westeros, to be honest with you.
I mean, honestly, I was reading this. This is. I'll just read it real quick because it's like 2 paragraphs, but there was quite a few options. But it says, as A Song of Ice and Fire reaches its final chapter, Brienne of Tarth, the honorable knight, ascends the Iron Throne. With Samwell Tarly, the bookist scholar turned brave warrior, as her trusted hand. Together they usher in a new era of peace, justice, and prosperity for the realm. Sounds right. Despite the ongoing threat of 4 powerful dragons, not sure why there's 4, Brienne and Samwell work tirelessly to maintain the stability and unity of the 7 kingdoms. In the icy and treacherous north, Theon Greyjoy, having redeemed himself in the eyes of the people, takes on the monumental task of reestablishing the Night's Watch to guard against the army of the dead, which apparently is still there. And Jorah Mormont sets sail for the Sunset Sea to die, spending his last years. So, I mean, honestly, I think like the most interesting part about this one is like Theon as maybe not necessarily taking over the Night's Watch, but like joining the Night's Watch would be interesting. Although physically, I don't know how he gets to where he can kind of make that work. He's a broken shell. So
Yeah, I mean, he kind of fits the mold of like old man though. Old man, what do you call it? Jaor. Although old man Jaor was also very physically fit,
yeah,
even at the end of his
yeah.
life. That's the
I
funny
mean,
thing about him.
it is possible that even given the abuse and the loss of body parts and such, like Theon could strengthen himself back up to back to fighting strength, I guess. The Night's Watch would make the most sense for him if that's something that he decided to join. But at the end of this is like, is there going to be a Night's Watch? Will there be a need for a Night's Watch? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a distinct like possibility to not work. Also, isn't the whole peace, justice, isn't that the Anakin line?
It probably is.
That's what I was thinking of when I first.
Empire of 7 kingdoms. Wait a second.
I have brought peace, justice, and prosperity to my new empire.
It's like, dude, you've been evil for like a day, Anakin. Anyway,
There's been a day and a half of this, bro. All you did was
yeah.
kill a bunch of children in the time between this.
Who's saying the younglings didn't need to die? Anyway, that's a separate subject.
They were such a burden on the state, They were such a tax burden on.
And just completely aside, I think it's great that Hayden Christensen has come back to Star Wars and is like actually having a good time when the fans are being nice, and I think that's wonderful. That's been like the past year. That's been like one of my feel good things. Seeing that.
Yeah.
Same.
The redemption of Hayden Christensen and the Star Wars fandom not being dicks.
That's what I was saying. It's more of the redemption of the fandom.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
True. Okay. So, any other theories that are connected to either the Bran ruling or who ends up ruling?
Ugh. I don't think it's, just speaking of the show, I don't think it's going to end up at all like the show. I really don't. I don't.
But then why did they have Bran there? I think Bran probably ends up in some way. I don't know.
It could still be Bran. I'm just saying I don't think the way all that goes down, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Sansa being queen in the north, or indeed overall queen. I've often thought, doing rereads, that she's being tutored by some of the best people in some of the most brutal ways.
Yeah.
And that I could see her ruling in some way, shape, or form.
I think she'll be one of the most qualified people left for sure at the end.
One of the most politically savvy, I think.
Mm-hmm. Now, whether that works in Westeros, I don't know.
I have a fondness for the idea that she'll rule in Harrenhal because she keeps getting connected to Harrenhal over and over and over again.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
Like the curse of Harrenhal is broken sort of thing?
Yeah, actually. Yeah, that she takes over essentially, and maybe we find out some more about Danelle Lofton.
Well, that does make a lot of sense.
What happened there?
If King's Landing is basically a ruin, that would actually make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Right? You have Harrenhal, which is huge, and it's like, hey, it just needs people and like resources to kind of make it a usable capital.
Yeah. It literally just needs people to work at the very, site itself to make it livable.
Right. Like 100,000 people show up to Harrenhal, and that could be a great place.
Legitimately, actually.
Do you all think Dany ends the way she ends in the show? Because I 100% think that's how it ends.
I don't want it to, but I think you're probably right.
I feel that when you go back and you read it in the light of the show and you realize how George is showing her, kind of leaning into her. I don't know. I think Duncan once did quite an interesting comparison of Dany and Jon as these two perspectives in Feast Dance, and that they're both trying on how to rule. And I think the lesson that Dany is learning from Marine is, I don't like this wise council democracy bullshit. I want the shit I want when I want it, how I want it. And the
soft approach doesn't work for her.
Yeah, I need to stop ruling like a Stark or a wise lord. I need to rule like a Targaryen. I need to be in the parlance of our times. I need to be authentic to myself. And I can totally see her becoming the kind of drunk on her own power and dragons, nasty sort of fascist dictator that we saw in the show. I mean, obviously in a better way, building up to it. And that the line of the Song of Ice and Fire is that Jon does love her and does have to kill her for the good of the realm. To me, that would be a really phenomenal ending. But that he himself kills his desire for power too. So I like the idea that these are our hero and heroine who've been trying to figure out how they can rule. Both have failed in a sense. Like he fails because he's killed at the wall. They find each other, and then the service Jon has to do is to kill Dany.
Which sucks,
but to me that makes total sense.
It does.
It does,
except I do wish that the way the show did it was like, okay, the Unsullied are like, no, Jon. Like, I feel like it makes more sense that if he kills Dany, that he's like the ultimate. Even in the show, he's the ultimate. Like, oh, I don't want it. It makes much more sense for them to want him to be like, okay, you take over now, and him to refuse it, than for them to be like, he has to be exiled.
Yeah. I think it's more that he will hand it over, right? And I could see him handing it over to Bran as a ruler with Sam as a hand, because Sam would be an amazing hand, right?
Yeah.
And actually, you could argue that if Sam had continued being his hand and not been sent off to go see the White Tower, that what happened to Jon wouldn't have happened to Jon. So I think that maybe that's how George gets there, rather than the way D&D got there. And maybe Sansa does just peace out at the North. I don't know, but I like the idea that actually
He gives it to one of the siblings.
I think the casual, naive fandom and probably Emilia Clarke were quite shocked at the ending for her. But I actually think that's probably about the truest thing that they got right. We'll probably never find out.
Well, I think
There was a
HBO
line.
was willing to give them a couple more seasons, and they could have made that make a lot more sense. But the pivot was so quick. Her decision to destroy the city was like it just didn't fit with the character people had watched for several seasons. You know, I mean, you could have gotten there. There's a way I can see that makes sense, but they just were in a hurry.
Going with that, the I think more the issue was the pacing and cutting the episodes and then making episodes longer, because that just destroyed pacing in that show completely. Made it feel, everything felt so rushed. I think with 10 episodes, even in those last 2 seasons, we might view things a lot more mixed, good versus bad. Whereas, like, I think we consider those last 2 seasons, especially those last 2 seasons, just so rushed and like jarring when they came out, because they were everything felt like slow motion and then like Quicksilver in those X-Men movies in terms of the speed of things. Like it was horribly off.
I mean, just the way characters traveled around, I mean, I think illustrates that very clearly.
Yeah. But I want to go back to the line that she says in the show, Dany, where it's like, what other people think don't matter, essentially. And I think that is what she's kind of learning, that the people of the places she's conquering, their thoughts on things don't matter, is what she's taking away slowly from these situations. I think she starts off very much caring about what the people of different places she goes into and conquers think. And I think that's changing.
You could say Jon's journey is the opposite of that, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Because he spends a lot of time girding himself and kind of, I mean, I don't know, his opinion kind of has to be more important as a bastard, as someone who's, you know, he cares about his family and he's trying to prove himself and all that. And so as a leader, he's just like, well, I need this. I'm going to do this, you know, and then why is this not working out? Why are people not getting it? And I think the lesson he learns up into his death in the book is like, yeah, no, it is important what all of these people think, even if they're wrong, even if they disagree with you. Like, it's important that you understand that and that you integrate it into your leadership style, or you die.
Mic drop. Any other good theories? Any other obscure characters we can get into? I mean, I don't have a theory about it, but I'd love to know how Catelyn's storyline ends, or Lady whatnot. What's her name? Lady
Stoneheart.
Stoneheart.
Lady Stoneheart.
How does that resolve?
Oh,
a lot of people think that she reunites with Sansa. I don't think so.
I don't think they're ever going to reunite. I just want to.
I think it's Arya that she meets up with again, but that's because I'm of the opinion
she sacrifices herself or dies again, or what do you think? Like, she just won't see her because she's gone.
I just don't think Sansa ends up in a place that's close enough to her. Like, she's going into the Riverlands, but I think that Sansa's going to end up in different places, possibly returning to King's Landing. That's like a thing that I've got going. But I think Arya is way more likely, but that's also because I think Arya and sorry about the sneeze, but Arya and so sorry. Arya and Ned are Arya and Cat versus Sansa and Ned are the two, like, I view, people tend to separate them differently and kind of go the opposite, but I tend to think of Cat and Arya being way more similar in their vengeance and their drive for that vengeance, whereas Sansa and Ned's story is about this, like, loss of innocence, this loss of this idealized world, and the realization that it's a lot more complicated than it is. And through their children, obviously, these kind of different plots are happening. But I tend to think that means Sansa's going back to King's Landing and back to the Viper's Nest that got her, father killed, whereas Arya's going back to the Riverlands to encounter her mother again. And when we consider that Cat's education's in the Riverlands, Arya's journey throughout the Riverlands is kind of her education in vengeance, right? And she's going back to that, almost certainly, for me, at least.
I agree. Although I would argue that I think by the end of it, I think Sansa and Arya will be far closer in character. And that, yes, she has a loss of innocence and a coming to knowledge of political skullduggery under people like Peter Baelish, but we're about to encounter something very traumatic for her. And I think by the end, she's going to be much more close to Arya in terms of no fucks given, being vengeful, but doing it through political machinery rather than kind of outright violence and assassination machinery. I think they will both be little vengeance hounds, but I think by the end they will be vengeance hounds using different, like, sort of, do you use politics,
Means.
the sword? Yeah, exactly. And I think
Yeah.
it will be subtly different because I think Arya's motivation so far is basically vengeance on behalf of her family, right? It's not personal.
Mhm.
Whereas I think after whatever horrific thing is going to happen, and has already partly happened with Peter Baelish, I think her vengeance will be on behalf of her own family, but it will also be on her own behalf.
Yeah.
And I think that gives it a totally different edge. And ultimately, I think Sansa will be the more dangerous of the two, even though I've never been a fan of Arya. I never understood the fan love for her, a bit like Dany. I think they're very dangerous, quasi-psychopathic people. But I think Sansa's the really dangerous one because she can move through political corridors. She's literally got the looks. She's got the kind of the genetics. She can now, as she's discovering, she can play the game, and she doesn't need to be the brutal killer. So I think Sansa becomes, in a sense, more dangerous than any of these three Stark women.
Well, it's the difference between someone that's personally dangerous, like as like a person around you, and someone that can levy essentially a military against you eventually. Like and I think that's what's eventually going to come. That like the Knights of the Vale are going to be at her beck and call because Sweet Robin will be, because I don't think that he's going to die. So
yeah, Arya is dangerous to individuals. She could be dangerous to any particular person, but
yes.
she's not going to be dangerous to a system.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Sansa I think of all the Stark children, Sansa is the one who is the political force and will have political loyalties, and therefore, she becomes therefore the most interesting player of the Game of Thrones for me out of those options. Unless, Bran with a new body then does become very potentially politically viable because he's a boy.
Right.
So that
that's
has
part of
thrown
why I
a
want Rickon
spanner.
gone.
Yeah, so it's kind of a spanner in my kind of Sansa theories, because I think the ability to sort of unite the Knights of the Vale and that kind of, we were saying before, what's left at the end of these wars? Well, actually, the wealth of the Eyrie is still kind of intact where we are in the books right now. One of the few places where it is. And it's still got an army that's mostly intact. Makes Sansa very powerful. But Bran, a genuine Stark, or Rickon, rediscovered, time jump forward as George was once going to do, then that becomes very interesting. I don't know where I'm going with this. Any other
I hear you on
that. Yeah, I've got to think on this Bran theory though, because that's really giving me cause to ruminate.
Yeah, I'm most interested in the side characters.
Yeah, uniting the North and the East. Yeah, let's do some side characters. Anyone got a good minor character we can get silly about?
I feel like we have too much information about the big characters, from the show and what may or may not be,
I've got a small one, I guess. Does anybody know who Shadrich of Shady Glen is?
Oh, I know the name.
The Mad Mouse.
Because there will be listeners who don't, so remind
Yeah,
us.
I'm gonna have to go to the wiki.
Okay, so the Mad Mouse, yes. Shadrich of Shady Glen. Brienne meets him on the road, in her, Sansa journey. And then he's similarly looking for Sansa at the time. And people tend to theorize, he might be of Varys, right? The whole idea that Varys had mice before he had, what do you call it? Before he had little birds. That's like explicitly stated. And he didn't used to take their tongues. It's a big thing that, kind of throws a spanner in the works of, as far as like his old information networks. So the next time we see Shadrich is in a Sansa chapter in the Eyrie. He's suddenly popped up, and this new guy's here, and I think he's gonna be participating in the tourney that's coming for the Winged Knights. So for Sir Shadrich, I do think he's an agent of Varys, but I think we're gonna see a sort of second confrontation on the Trident. Right, I think her and Harry will have ridden out. It's already on the Trident, and Shadrich's gonna approach them to try and steal her away, because she'll be, separated from a bunch of guards, actually away from the camp itself, and it's the perfect time. And so we're gonna.
He's snatching away to take her to Varys. Where is Varys at this point?
He's with the Aegon camp in King's Landing, or in the Stormlands, headed in Storm's End or something like that.
And what does he want with her? Just to kill her because she's a threat to Dany? Or what would he want Elaine Sansa for?
Oh, I think he knows that she's Sansa, and he wants to take her back to Varys as a tool for Varys.
But what does Varys want Sansa for? What's the end for
Well,
Varys?
I mean, Sansa is a pretty good candidate for marriage, all things considered, for Fagon. And I tend to love that Ashford theory that purports all of her various suitors are essentially the suitors of the Tourney of Ashford. This is a whole nother theory that people play in. But outside of that, I think that she's a candidate for a Fagon marriage. And if not, she's certainly a tool to install a loyal Stark and Winterfell / a loyal Riverlands. You know, like she's someone that actually can go to someone like Edmure and work with him, or go north and work to bring them back under, the Iron Throne when.
And why would she? What would be her incentive to cooperate with Varys, the guy who betrayed her dad?
Well, going with that, I think that it would be probably pretty advantageous for Varys to reveal something at the time about Littlefinger, or he would think he could reveal something about Littlefinger to get her to switch. Because
okay. Yeah.
Like Varys and Littlefinger tend to team up actually at times to do their little machinations, and I mean, like, I'm of the opinion that the riot in King's Landing, right, is basically a Littlefinger op, but with the okay of Varys to let it happen, to make sure it happened correctly, and they both got things that they wanted out of it. Varys got Tyrick, obviously. So going back to Sansa, I think that there's a second confrontation on the Trident. Well, what happens in the original confrontation on the Trident, if not Nymeria showing up? And I think it's very possible that, again, Nymeria shows up, and what we're left with is Sansa there with a direwolf and 2 dead men in Harry the Heir and Shadrich. And this throws, total chaos into the Littlefinger plan, because now Sansa is for sure revealed as Sansa Stark. And now Harry the Heir is dead, which was, kind of what he was banking on in part, or at least Sansa being able to control him.
So how do you feel Harry the Heir, maybe I'll have to give Pops 88 a ring because he has theories about Harry the Heir. How do you think that's going to play out in the books?
I think he's a moron that's going to die probably pretty quickly. I have very low opinion of Harry in general. I think he's like not meant for this world.
I think he'll have a usage, but like I don't think he will have much of an arc. He'll be an object lesson for someone,
and that someone being likely Sansa, more than likely. Like I see him as a political trainings wheel in manipulation for her. You have this kind of idiot, for lack of a better word, who she can try and like manipulate over time with the encouragement of Littlefinger. I think that comes with, a worry for her, because I don't think Harry the Heir is the most chivalrous of men, and I don't think that situation is going to feel great for her overall. So, he dies eventually with Shadrich.
Okay. I think that all makes sense. Any other final crackpot theories? Any minor characters we can have some fun with here?
Like the minorest of characters that we still have nothing on, Benjen.
True.
I don't think we ever see him again, and I hope we don't see him again.
I think we don't. Yeah,
it's the same for Rickon. Actually, I think Rickon will be one of the loose ends that George. I think I would admire George if he just let them run off and we just missing, presumed dead or fed or one or the other.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't want them to like die off screen or something. I feel like Rickon has to move out of the way, and all the theories are about how he dies or gets possessed or something along those lines. And that's why I'm like, I would like that not to happen. With everything that's happened to the Stark children, and he's already
show Gendry's and
having problems.
Just sails away somewhere, is what you're thinking.
Yeah, I mean, like, or, because he's already in a position where you get a boat and maybe he could get over to Bravos or something, or I don't know, or maybe he just like gets lost with some wildlings and they just like wait out the whole thing, and he just grows up feral with some wildlings, and like postscript you have like 16-year-old Rickon who's this like feral wildling warg, like that works for me.
I mean, I want him to live too. I don't want Rickon to die generally.
And I don't want to see another fake, like, because we already had the fake.
I don't want that. We already have fake Arya.
Fake Arya. So like, I don't. Well, that's what I'm saying is I don't think that's something that he's going to use.
Do double. Yeah.
The show brought him back literally just to be like, aha, look, we're killing another Stark. Like, that wasn't needed either.
And worse than Sansa's character.
Yeah. So one can only hope if we ever get new content.
Yeah.
You know.
I've got a small Benjen theory, I guess.
Go on then.
I think he sacrificed it in some sort of ritual to bring down the wall. I think he's the key to bringing it down more than anyone else.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I wouldn't want that to be the case. I want him to disappear. So he takes on basically what in the show would have been the Arya stabby role. Is that what it is?
Oh no, I think he's literally like they're gonna do some sort of thing to bring either part of the wall down or open a hole in it with him. Hence, we never get a body for him. Hence, I mean, like we know the others are intelligent. We know that they at least have a language where they speak. They they laugh at Waymar.
Yeah, Waymar Royce. Yeah.
Yeah, they laugh at him, or at least seemingly laugh at him. And the idea that plainly, with a name like the others, we're supposed to think of the way that, when you meet a foreign culture, at least in our own history as humans, we tend to otherize them, make them less than human, and dehumanize them overall. Well, going with that, I think that the others are plainly like pretty human in the like intelligence and having their own culture way, but not. I lost my train of thought. But going with that, I think that they're keeping Benjen to do something with him. Maybe it's not a sacrifice. Maybe it's something else. Maybe I have no idea. But I don't think that he's dead. I think that they captured him on purpose to keep him alive.
Wow.
Because having a male full-blooded Stark is for some reason important.
Yeah. And if it's Bran the Builder building the wall, maybe there's something about blood of Stark can undo the wall in some way, I guess. Some Stark paste.
Yeah.
Okay. I could buy that. I'd be sad to see him again, but I can buy it. I like the actor, Jason more. So that'd be cool.
Same. I do like the actor. I'm trying to think of anyone else. Oh, I mean, like, it's not necessarily my theory, but I really like the idea of a second Red Wedding that happens to the Lannisters. Any takers on that one?
No, but let's go through the theory, because I do want to get into a bit like what happens to Jaime and Cersei. I think we've done so many major characters, we probably should have a little chat about
what would be the setup for that?
The setup is that essentially the Brotherhood runs a second what's called a Red Wedding, likely in Riverrun, because I think that's where the marriage is going to happen. And it's poor Davon, who's like the cool Lannister that it happens to.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And so a bunch of Freys and Lannisters get butchered at a wedding, in revenge, essentially, of the first Red Wedding. There's people that even connect the whole Tom of Sevens talking to Edmure alone thing to that essentially it was all an act. That Edmure took the thing because they were planning something anyway. And he was like, take the deal now, get out, because we're going to have our revenge. Because we know Tom of Sevens is a
right
Brotherhood.
I would like to see the redemption of Edmure, and that's partly because I really love the actor who plays him.
Such a good actor.
Yeah, he's so good in Manhunt right now. So I would love to see, and he's such a whipping boy, he's such a laughing stock.
I hate it.
I would love to see the redemption of Edmure, that he turned out to be a bit smarter than we all thought. And actually, we're very in fitting with George R. R. Martin, right? Don't underestimate people. That sometimes they know more than you think. So yeah, I'd be down with it. I need to investigate that theory though.
Who would they frame for a second Red Wedding? Like, because they were running around kind of. The Brotherhood's been running around kind of posing as other people lately. Mm-hmm. Do you think they would be like Stark banners everywhere, or what do you think they would do?
See, I think that they're going to make it as if it was essentially a fight broke out between the two of them. The idea being to divide the Lannisters and Freys completely, right? If you have this horrible wedding where a bunch of people die and most of the people that survive are not a part of the wedding party itself.
So some of them are dressed as Lannisters, some of them are dressed as Freys, and I like that.
Breaking the alliance seems like a good idea for them, and it makes sense to me that you would try to divide them so that you can destroy them.
Okay. Are there any like burning ones you wanted to get off your chest while we were all together on this?
Darkstar sits the Iron Throne.
Strong Belwas?
What happens to House Manwoody at the end of this?
Belwas is hand of the king.
Who are we vassals to? Like, and what's going to happen to us?
Oh, that's a great question.
Tristane and Myrcella, who's living a second life as her cousin. Please, I don't want Myrcella to die, guys. No.
Well, maybe we're just somewhere in Dawn, just chilling. in a newly succeeded kingdom as the Seven Kingdoms have sort of broken up. And we're just like hanging out, just like, chilling, sunbathing and eating citrus fruits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, surprise twist, Moore's Manwoody becomes the ruler of the Reach. Something, I don't know. Trying to think. Like who could he marry? He's not married, right? Because a lot of people are losing a lot of people, and there's going to be a lot of room for marriages. So,
and Manwoody survives. I mean, like genealogical procreation is what we do.
Manwoody finds a way.
Manwoody finds a way. Do you think there are new listeners to VOK who have no idea what the fuck we're talking about right now?
Listen, okay, if there's anything I know about A Song of Ice and Fire fans, it's that they should be addicts for the wiki, because that's where you go. And if they're not, then that's on them.
You go to the wiki trying to figure this shit out, and then you go to podcast.
Yeah, Podcast of Ice and Fire used to basically categorize people who were active on their forum in kind of levels. So you started out as a micro Woody, and then you became a tiny Woody and a small Woody, and then you became like, Lord High Woody of the McWood. And it's just because we thought George R.R. Martin put in a dick joke in his books to see if anyone would find it, and that made us funny, made us happy, and we thought that we would call ourselves, we're Vassals of Kingsgrave, because we are leal to a Podcast of Ice and Fire, but our house is House Manwoody. So we are not even House Manwoody in VOK. We're like vassals to House Manwoody.
Yeah, we run like the mill.
We're a knightly house we're
farming the land.
Yeah, exactly.
But Manwoody is honestly one of the best. It's like the best non-major house because it's a funny name, obviously. Like it's very silly, like Dick and Manwoody. I mean, come on. But like they've got a very metal, crowned fucking skull, which is metal as shit. Kingsgrave, like literally the king's buried. Like there's a lot of good history that's like it's like pretty fucking badass. So
is there no fan theory wherein House Manwoody ends up on top in some way, at least in Dawn? Like where is the glory for the Manwoody?
Interesting.
I'll leave you with your homework, boys and girls.
I'll work on that one. We'll see if we can do some connecting.
There's got to be some fanfic out there where Dick and Manwoody ends up on the Iron Throne. On that happy note, because Manwoody forever, thanks to all of you who are listening to this episode or who have ever listened to or contributed to any of the 800 episodes of Vassals of Kingsgrave. It 100% surprises me that we continue and that anyone beyond ourselves is listening to this craziness. We are very appreciative of all of you who've contributed over the years and people who've come in and come out of the community. And after this, we will have a number of clips from people with their crackpot theories. And I will mark very clearly if they are full of show spoilers or not. But thank you for listening. Thanks, guys, for hopping on.
Thanks, Bina. Thanks for hosting. And thanks to everybody who's been a part of this.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. And we may never get the final book, but I think an episode like today just shows you how rich the world is and how much fun it is just to derp around. So thank you to George for that.
He did make a derpable world. We love it for that.
And derping is our core competence. All right, boys. Have a great one. Bye.
Bye.
I was trying to do the chair noise.
The door creak thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a sound effect. Yeah. Creak.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. But I asked ChatGPT to write an ending with House Manwoody on the Iron Throne.
While we're on Michal, you are officially a VOK curator. For VOK 800, do you have a crackpot theory about how a character, a narrative arc, or even something really minor finishes up when the books finally are delivered to us and end?
Oh, okay. Does it have to be crackpot, or could it just be
it can be genuine. It can be genuine how you want a certain character or a narrative arc to resolve.
Okay, so I have two. One is good and one is bad, but neither of them are going to happen. The bad one is I've for a very long time that the only way for Brienne to resolve her fight with Jaime that is supposed to be upcoming, the duel that they are presumably going to have, is for her to throw the thing and like deliberately step into the path of his sword and have him kill her. I do not think that's going to happen, and I have obviously a lot of mixed feelings about what that would represent, but I struggle to understand otherwise how they get out of there. So yeah, that's the first one. And the second one is that Littlefinger dies of a cold or like pneumonia or something, because I love the idea of like his death not even being like dramatically valuable and just like, you know, he's just like getting slowly sicker and sicker.
Yeah, it's just a stupid, pathetic death.
Exactly. And he's like, how is this happening? You know.
So Pat 2.0, do you have a VOK 800 either cockamamie crazy or genuine idea of how your favorite character or narrative arc or plot is going to end in the unlikely event that we get A Song of Ice and Fire to its end?
This isn't going to be popular, and I've already said this on the Discord, but I think that Dave and Dan have given us the ending. That's where George is going to take it. I just think the difference between what they've done and what George will do is that he will write it much more gracefully.
I'm with you. I
think it's there, so I think it's just deliver it gracefully. I have got a theory, which I think is my own theory that I've invented myself, just because I've not read it anywhere else.
Okay.
But I believe in Jojen paste. I think that is definitely happened. And there's a section where Cold Hands is taking them through the forest on the way, and Bran is being carried by Cold Hands' elk. And there's about half a page where Bran describes how they had to eat the elk, you know, despite the fact it had been a good servant and had helped him all the way. And I thought that was foreshadowing for the Jojen paste. So I know a lot of people dismiss it. They're like, oh, it's not true. But anyway, that's my...
It was like commonly accepted, actually.
Well, we're obviously moving in different circles. Yours are probably far better read than mine. And...
yeah,
you know. So, but anyway, that's
very
my.
Good. So D&D gave us the ending plus Jojen paste. I'm here for that. Hey everyone, this is a little addendum to our VOK 800 episode. It's been a 007 back with another of the VOK curators. Welcome, Duncan.
Hi everyone, this is Duncan, also known as Valkryist on the Discord.
Yeah, and Duncan's been with us almost since the very beginning. What was your first episode? Was it The Wire? I'm trying to think back.
No, I think The Wire was my second one. The first one was in the single digits. We did a Feast Dance reread. And I think I volunteered for the Jon Snow episode because no one else wanted to. But that was my first one in a very cold flat that I lived in Ballarat at the time. I remember getting up at 4 a.m. and putting on my dressing gown and half asleep, but I really enjoyed it. And obviously I came back.
Well, there you go. I mean, that is real dedication to the cause because you are in one of the inhospitable time zones as well. But I guess that must be, 10 years ago or something? I mean, it feels like a while, right, since we kicked off.
Yeah, more. 2013, I guess it'd be late 2013.
Gosh. And so along this journey, I mean, I think it's fair to say you're one of the more articulate and thoughtful voices in the VOK community.
It's been alleged. Unproven, though. Unsupported by evidence.
Well, I think it probably helps that tell the listeners a little bit about what you studied, like your doctorate, and sort of because you come to it with a kind of literary theory, or maybe more of a literary framework than many of us approaching the material.
Yeah, well, back when I started the podcast, I had no idea what I was doing. I was doing a Bachelor of Arts at university, you know, trying out this subject and trying out that subject and feeling a bit lost. But at the end of the degree, I was asked to create like a thesis, like a 5,000-word research project on any topic I wanted, which is the first time that had happened. And I was, 2 years into my A Song of Ice and Fire obsession, and I had no one to talk about it with, and I had not really found any kind of literary scholarship on the topic. So I decided to do a kind of philosophical approach to the series. And I wrote a thesis, and I loved it. And that's kind of what inspired me to continue into academia and teaching at universities. So I went on to do an honors thesis and then a PhD in found footage horror films. But all along the way, I maintained my love and my obsession with A Song of Ice and Fire and continued to just, write essays for fun. So the original essay, the original thesis was for university, and it was looking at meta-narratives, which is a concept put forth by a postmodern philosopher, Jean-Francois Lyotard, who suggested that the postmodern condition is an incredulity towards meta-narratives. And I definitely read that into Martin's works, that he's showing all of these kind of cultural institutions, including the sort of the conventions of the fantasy genre, and he's very skeptical of them. And I think the series is very much a deconstruction of all of these frameworks that we've come to rely on morally, ethically, institutionally, culturally, and the characters go through that journey. So that inspired me to continue writing about the series, and I published essays on various topics with Tower of the Hand over the years, and podcasted a lot, and met up with fans at conventions, and
Yeah, it's worth saying to listeners who are into A Song of Ice and Fire, but maybe joined in latter years when, after the last book was published, the Tower of the Hand is a really great resource for long form essays. I mean, you've written there, I think a few others in the VOK community have too.
Yeah, Michael Karwadakis, he's published quite a few essays there as well.
Yeah, exactly.
One of our podcasters.
Yeah, exactly. Also Australian, maybe there's a link. But we're talking today, we did another episode, which I'll link in the show notes, to your previously published book, which feels like it wasn't long ago. You're doing a book a year at the moment.
No, it was a happy coincidence. I mean, these were my twin obsessions: found footage horror films and A Song of Ice and Fire over the past decade, or maybe not a decade, but quite a while. And they sort of both came to fruition around the same time. So no, I will not be publishing a book a year, but I'm glad.
I think it's amazing.
It feels like a culmination of a few years of work.
Absolutely. Well, that was a really great episode. And Duncan, which is so amazing, has a book of essays. Is it a book of essays published on A Song of Ice and Fire? And we thought, what better time than VOK 800, one of our centenary episodes, to talk about it? Because I think in a sense, it's almost like without... I don't know if we can claim anything of it in the VOK community, but it kind of feels like one of our own has been published on A Song of Ice and Fire. It's a really big moment, like for all the kind of dick jokes and silliness of the community, that it has on occasion been a thoughtful place for discussions and testing out ideas. And I think we're all just so incredibly proud of you, Duncan, for like getting a book out of thoughtful Song of Ice and Fire stuff. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the format, where it's published, where people can find it? And obviously I'll put all the links in the show notes for the episode. But yeah, just talk us through when it was published, how we can get it, and what it's about.
Well, that's very kind of you, Bina. Thank you. I appreciate those words. The full title of the book is Notes from the Citadel, and the subtitle is The Philosophy and Psychology of A Song of Ice and Fire. It is available on Amazon in ebook. You can also order the paperback on ebook, and you can also order the paperback on the Barnes and Noble website. So
actually, you should probably tell people your full name, like your author name, as opposed to just Duncan and Valkryist, right? So
that's a good idea. Yeah, good tips for publishing authors to actually give their name. My full name is Duncan Hubber, spelled Hubber. So if you search Hubber in Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, my book should pop up. And what was your second question? Sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, just to tell us a little bit about the format. But before we get to that, it's probably worth pointing out to people that not only can you potentially choose to buy it for yourself, but you can also choose to request a copy for your local library, which is another lovely way of supporting the book, not being out of pocket yourself, and just making it available to wider readers. So that's another, I know some of the VOK community have done that, and that's another lovely way to support the project. But yeah, tell us a bit about the format. So what are the themes of the essays? How is it structured?
So it's a collection of 11 essays dealing in philosophy and psychology in various ways. Some of the essays were inspired by episodes of the podcast that we recorded. I remember when we were doing our full linear reread of the series, I came on for Bran Stark's last chapter when he's getting his teachings from the three-eyed crow. And I thought the chapter and Martin sort of put forth this interesting perspective on how we perceive time, or rather how the three-eyed crow presents time to the reader, not as a linear thing, but as a kind of eternal or, predetermined thing. And so I explored that idea in relation to the philosophy of eternalism, use that as a lens to examine other aspects of the book, particularly prophecies, whether prophecies can exist in a world, whether free will can exist in a world where prophecies exist and are seen to come true, or whether everything is predetermined and we're just kind of like going through the motions of a world that has no past, present, or future. Everything's already fixed in place. We only perceive it as linear. Another episode was a panel discussion that I actually did with Michael Kalwadegi at the Melbourne Thrones Con, and that was looking at conspiracy theories. So the beloved practice of theory crafting in the A Song of Ice and Fire fandom. So I wrote that inspired another essay on the idea of conspiracy theories in the books, the fact that we often have very limited knowledge and that our knowledge is constantly being tested and questioned throughout the series, and both the characters and the reader. Martin culminates this sort of paranoid skepticism and suspicion in us that we're always questioning everything on the surface. We're always trying to get to a deeper level, and that can sometimes be fruitful and productive, and sometimes can go into very strange and bizarre places if you've read some of the wackier theories in the fandom, but always very fun.
I feel like strange and bizarre places could be like the subtitle of VOK. That's
absolutely.
The way we live, strange
and one of the arguments I put forth is this is the result or the consequence of having this obsessed, devoted fan base leaving their beloved series on a cliffhanger and then not publishing anything to sort of resolve that tension. So we have no new books to read, so we just create new stories out of the stories that we have. So that's where fan fiction comes from. That's where theory crafting comes from. So there's lots of different essays. I'm really proud of them. I think they add a new insight to the books and the characters and Martin's writing. I look at psychology a lot as well. I do a really in-depth psychological study of Arya Stark as this
and what's your
person
conclusion?
that is.
I'm unusual in the fandom that I never liked her, and I think she's got to go. To me, she's like dragons. Like she's become something so a bit like Tyrion is, I guess, by the end. Like there's something. I think people think of her as this like spunky, perky little girl, and they don't really acknowledge what she's becoming. So, what's your theory on Arya?
Well, I'm different to you in the sense that I love her. She's probably my favorite character, and that's why I wanted to write about her. But I absolutely acknowledge in the essay the very disturbing things she does. I don't love her because she's necessarily a good person, although I think she might be able to redeem herself. But I think psychologically she's fascinating, and she's kind of like that's where my heart broke the most, seeing her journey from this really wide-eyed, spunky, tween, and becoming just kind of destroyed and corrupted, and having her heart broken by the world. And I look at it as a process of depersonalization, which is a process where if you undergo a traumatic event, sometimes you become sort of detached from reality, or you see yourself outside your own body. And I think Martin explores that idea both through his narration and his examination of Arya's point of view, but also her skin changing abilities, the fact that she is constantly sort of skin changing into different animals and also trying on different faces. So it's a sort of, I say it's sort of a metaphor for this idea of becoming detached from the person you are because it's so painful. So you almost deny your own personhood and try to become something different. And I sort of speculate where that might lead her and what the function of the Faceless Men organization is and things like that. I also look at my least favorite or my most hated characters, which are the Ironborn. I really struggled with those characters throughout the series, particularly A Feast for Crows. But the more I thought about them, the more interesting I found them as a kind of culture dealing with a traumatic event that they have never really been able to get past, which is the loss of the old way. And the fact that they have this deep and destructive nostalgia, what's called a restorative nostalgia, where they're constantly trying to return to this golden age that may or may not have ever existed. And because of that constant looking to the past and this attempt to recreate the past or restore the lost home, as some psychologists have put it, they can never really it's a self-destructive process. They can never really get past that and create a future, a sustainable future for themselves.
There's an interesting crossover essay between the Ironborn and the Mandalore and the Way.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And historically, you see that in many different countries, the American South, the idea of the lost cause.
Lost cause, yeah, I was just thinking that.
Yeah, the stabbed in the back theory in Germany and all those kinds of destructive, toxic nostalgic philosophies. Martin is very much a student of history, so he draws a lot upon medieval and modern history in his and colonial history in his view of the world.
Absolutely. So a couple of questions follow up. Can you enjoy and read this book if you didn't watch the show? Because I think it's now becoming a very minority part of our community, but there are some people who still haven't watched the show. So are there essays, or is it like labeled that you can, or does it just assume that you will know the show and the book when you're reading?
No. The majority of essays, 9 of the 11 essays, are only dealing with the books.
Great.
One essay is examining the 4th season of the show, which is looking at the theme of slavery in the 4th season. Both slavery as a psychological concept, but also as an institution that characters like Daenerys are trying to sort of combat or reform. And then there is another essay on House of the Dragon, where I look at the it's sort of a feminist or a psychological reading, where I'm looking at the Madonna-whore complex, both as a psychological concept, but also a sociological concept in that series. And the fact that it's a series about, 2 women who have very different perceptions and very different identities in Westerosi society. And the Greens and the Blacks very much fall along gendered lines or sort of patriarchal norms about the Madonna and the whore complex. So those are the only 2 essays that deal with the TV series. The rest are all book focused.
And my second question is, if you're reading it and you're a layperson, as I am, and you don't have formal, you've never studied psychology and philosophy, is it going to be easy to follow? Is there terminology that's more kind of academic, or is it designed for the general but smart general reader?
No, I wouldn't call it an academic tech. It's sort of academic light. So I introduce some academic terms, but I explain them and I use the series to help the reader understand them better. So it's a way to sort of be introduced to certain psychology or philosophical terms, but they're easy to understand because I put them in A Song of Ice and Fire terms.
Because so much has been written and said and dissected, as you say, in the absence of a new book on A Song of Ice and Fire. Maybe a good sort of closing question is, what's the idea or the insight or the theory that you have that you're, not necessarily that you're the most proud of, but you think that's the most thought-provoking and new? What is the one thing that you think actually people will not have looked at this in this way before? I have to say, what I love about George's writing and all great writers is you can always find new things. They're so rich, they're so deep, they're so slippery in some ways. But what's the thing that you think is the most new for people to read about? Or maybe you've already covered one of your comments.
Possibly. I write an essay about the others, which is obviously a big part of the books. It's they're often regarded as the ultimate villain of the series, but I don't think they've ever really been examined as anything but this kind of boogie people that occasionally rear their heads, but never played that big of a role in the series. But I thought the idea of the sort of philosophical notion of the others as this kind of this sort of opposite or opposing force to society. We read the other into our enemies as, embodying all of the things that we aren't, all of the things that oppose us, all of the desires that are, disgusting or repellent to us. So I do a sort of in-depth reading of those characters, which I think is quite interesting and I think brought some things out of the text that I didn't really know until I started to think about it. So I'd recommend that essay in particular. I think I'm pretty proud of that one. But I think, each essay has something for everyone. I think there'll be one, thing you hadn't thought about or one aspect of a character you hadn't considered. And I think Martin does a good job at joining everything together. What one character is going through, is reflected and parallel to what other characters are going through. And there's themes that run through his whole book.
Well, it sounds intriguing. I can't wait to read it, and maybe we'll get some discussion pods going on the Discord, and maybe we'll have a few episodes out in due course when people have had a chance to look through and discuss. Because it's not like we got anything else to read in the meantime.
No.
maybe I'll close it out by kind of linking this back to the main body of the podcast, which was a little bit sillier, and talking about, if there's one character, one plot line, one place that you have a theory about how it's going to finish in the books. What is your either a crackpot theory or a serious thing? I mean, maybe given what you said earlier, the answer is, how do you think Arya's storyline's going to end up, and the Faceless Men's impact on the books?
Ooh.
In a hypothetical future where we get them all. But you can pick something else. It can be something completely silly or, minor.
Yeah. Well, I have written extensive fan fiction back in the day on Arya Stark and Jon Snow. Very long time ago, probably before I even started the podcast.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm sure you can find those in some dark, danky precinct of the internet, and see what my either theory or fantasy is for what those characters will turn out. But I think seriously, I think I like the idea of Arya, reuniting with Sansa in some way. It's hard for me to think that the Faceless Men are going to tolerate her behavior enough to send her on a serious mission. But if she does get sent on a serious mission, I like the idea of her being contracted by Littlefinger to take someone out of the area, and that might bring those two characters back together. Or if we think about the mission of the Faceless Men as trying to bring down the dragons or destroy the Valyrian dynasty, she might be sent to deal with to Daenerys and her dragons. But I don't know. It's hard. I have vague theories, but it's really hard for me to imagine how it all comes together because there's so many spinning wheels. Aegon and the Dornish and I can't even imagine what the Ironborn and Euron are up to. He's threatening sort of a god.
Suffering.
There's just so much going on. I really can't. And maybe George is struggling to imagine the ending. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is what's going on with George. I think it's just he's created such a beautifully rich world. It's almost too rich to bring it back together. And it was really funny. Like, I recently did a very speed rewatch of Game of Thrones. And obviously, like everyone else, I had some frustrations with the latter seasons. But it is hilarious how when you get into like season 6, 7, they're just like killing characters off with gay abandon because they just need to prune it down to set themselves up for 8. And I have to say, I also think that when you watch it at speed, and maybe away from the hysteria of the initial watch, you do see some of the arcs they're creating, which I think when you get into the minutiae of, pulling it all apart, get a little bit lost. And I'm not saying I agree with all their choices at all, but I saw maybe more of the logic, more of the kind of what they were trying to go for, if not succeeding. So I had and maybe it was a nostalgia watch. I felt very benevolent towards it by the end. But actually, what the reuniting of Arya and Sansa and 8 was a very moving moment and really lovely. I'm looking forward to that if we ever get a book.
Oh yeah, and some my favorite episode of the series is still from quite late, which is the Hardhome episode, which is something that was not in the books, but I thought was amazing in the show. So I'm really grateful for that. And even the really late seasons, like I was pretty disappointed with the execution and the writing, but the actual broad strokes of what happens were quite exciting. Just makes me excited or hopeful or sad maybe that about whether George will actually get to give us his version of
tell his own story. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, it's lovely to have. I mean, VOK 800, our centenaries. We always try and get back to our Song of Ice and Fire roots, even if there's not been much activity in the intervening 100 episodes. And it has been fun on this episode just to get back to a little bit of the crackpottery. And it's amazing that your book is out. I really feel so proud of it, which is so weird because it's not a book I've written or contributed to in any way.
Sweet.
But I do. It feels like the community's all grows up. Like something amazing out of all this discussion, something concrete and real came out of it, which is this amazing book. So,
it's an amazing community, and I'm very proud of our podcast. I'm very proud that it's managed to get to 800 episodes and is still going. And
it's kind of nuts, isn't it?
And hey, we've got House of the Dragon in June. I think that'll be fun.
Exactly. I think it will be fun.
Yeah, there's things to look forward to.
Exactly. Well, on that positive and happy note, thank you so much for jumping on, Duncan, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you very much, Bina. I appreciate it. See you later.
No problem. Bye.
Happy 800.